My name is Lacey Lieberthal. I am the administrative and program coordinator for CAM. And since it is shortly after noon, looks like we have a good number of people in, we're going to go ahead and get started. Just a quick couple of housekeeping notes. First of all, this program is being recorded and it will be posted to YouTube following today's program. And if you have any questions or any issues, feel free to message me using the chat box, or you can send me an email at admin@calmuseums.org, and I will do my best to address your question. And I'm going to pass it over to Tomoko Kuta, the chair of CAM's program committee, to introduce today's program. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Lacey, for all that you do to make these conversations possible. It's really great that we get to continue to do this. So before we begin the event, we want to acknowledge and honor the original inhabitants of our various regions. A land acknowledgement is a critical step towards working with Native communities to secure meaningful partnership and inclusion in the stewardship and protection of their cultural resources and homelands. Our institutions were founded upon exclusions and erasures of Indigenous peoples. We honor and are grateful for the land we occupy and recognize the ongoing damage of settler colonialism. Let's take a moment to honor these ancestral grounds that we are collectively gathered upon and support the resilience and strength that all Indigenous people have shown worldwide. I am on the traditional territory of the Kumeyaay peoples. I encourage you to name and acknowledge the Native peoples where you are located in the chat box. And there's a link that you can use if you need to look up your area. On behalf of our program committee, I'd like to welcome you all to this ReMuseum program. Recover, Reimagine, Revive. What does ReMuseum mean to you? Thank you for joining this virtual conversation to delve deeply into the challenges that the museum field is currently facing and how our field can move forward. In this series, members of our program committee are in dialogue with special guests who have knowledge or experience to help us consider new perspectives or explore new directions for our field. Let me remind you that CAM has a board-approved code of conduct for participation in our programs. A link was sent to you in the confirmation for this program, but Lacey is also going to paste a link in the chat box for your convenience.
I got rid of the cart though.
CAM is committed to providing a safe, inclusive, and respectful learning and networking experience for everyone. And with that, I'd like to introduce two program committee members who will lead today's discussion, Delta Pick Mello and Vicki Wawerchak. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Thanks for the introduction, and thank you to all of you who are joining us today. Delta and I are excited to be helping to put together this presentation for everybody, and let's get started by learning who our presenters are today. Alexandra Kowalski is the program coordinator for the Sacramento History Museum. She fell into the museum world completely by accident, taking on a part-time tour guide position during her off-season as an archaeologist. She's been working at the Sacramento History Museum in various capacities since 2014. However, she left a few years ago to work as an education assistant at the Hagen Museum in Stockton, California. There, she focused on school and family programming in the brick and mortar, never considering trying a virtual format. But her first day back at the Sacramento History Museum in her new position as the programs coordinator was, you guessed it, on March 16th, the first day the museum had to close to the public, unfortunately. Since then, she's been attempting a wide variety of virtual programs for all audiences and to varying successes. And I'm sure we're going to hear more about some of those successes and challenges today in her conversation. And then our other presenter is Colby Sellers, who's the Director of Ancillary Operations at the Shedd Aquarium. He was born in Chicago, raised in Central and Southern Illinois, and he attended Western Illinois University, where he attained a degree in theater and history. He worked at the Museum of Science and Industry for 3 years, giving tours before moving into their education department. In 2006, he began his career at the Shedd Aquarium, initially brought on as an actor to provide narration for the aquatic presentations. From there, he moved into what was guest services, which is now called guest relations, as a manager, then assistant director, and now the director of the offshoot department of the ancillary operations. That department focuses on mission-based revenue generating and experience enhancing programs and activities, and we'll be learning how those experience enhancing programs became virtual. So before we hear about their presentations, we just heard that this ReMuseum series is all about how our field can continue to move forward with everything we're facing. So we're doing our best to recover, to reimagine, and to revive our industry. So we thought it'd be great to start by asking, Ali, let's start with you. What does ReMuseum mean to you?
Thanks, Vicki. So I thought a lot about this question, and it could go in a lot of different directions. But for me in particular, the most important part of ReMuseum is the refocusing and reevaluation of our museum's priority and what its purpose is. For a really long time, we've been kind of developing a pile of what if, or wouldn't it be nice, or we'd love to try this, but with all of our day-to-day activities, we just couldn't get around to it. But having our schedules be completely wiped out by the pandemic means we actually had the time to look at those ideas, think harder about them, and try some of the things we never really felt we could. And I think for us in particular, the biggest blessing of the pandemic is allowed us to switch from that audience development model with such a big focus on revenue to more of that community engagement model with really trying to meet our audiences and provide the services they need, even in this incredibly scary time, and hopefully with as much accessibility as possible.
Great, thank you, Ali. And Colby, same question for you. What does ReMuseum mean to you?
Sure, I'll just, thank you very much, Vicki. I'd like to just build on a lot of what Ali said about community partnerships and accessibility and rethinking things, and just add a slight spin on it that we really had our whole world shaken up, which is terrifying, but it also can be tremendously rewarding. This is one small example of that. Prior to COVID, one of the things Shed Aquarium had a name for was very, very long lines, people waiting outside, because only 15 to 25% of our audience would buy their tickets ahead of time. And so their experience was marred at the very beginning, at least wasn't what it could have been. Now we're at 85 to 95% of people getting their tickets in advance because of the shift in where the world is right now. And so that was an opportunity. I think that there are a lot of things, if we really look at what's going on and the challenges that are presented, we have the ability to find the opportunities to make things better. Now guests are spending the majority of their time inside rather than outside. That opportunity is helping to break down even more barriers so that our guests can come even better face-to-face with the animals they call Shed home. So reimagining, rethinking, and refocusing.
That's great, thank you. I think a lot of us are looking at these opportunities and trying to find the silver lining in what's happening. So thank you for both sharing that. So we'll get right into our presentations, and please feel free to use the chat function to ask any questions you may have while Colby and Ali are sharing their experiences. Delta will be monitoring that, and then we'll have some time after to have a discussion. So Colby, if you want to go ahead and get started. Thank you.
Sure. I'm sorry. I think there was a little lag there for a second with the connection. Could you repeat? I'm so sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I was just saying that people can use the chat function if they want to ask questions during your presentation, and Delta will be monitoring that. And then after both presentations, we'll go ahead and have a little question and answer session. But so all right, go ahead.
Okay,
Thank
very
you.
good. Sure. Sorry about that. So really quickly, with respect to virtual experiences at Shed, we had prior to COVID, there was just one experience. It was what was called Live from Behind the Scenes, and it was a school program, very little footprint, and that was about it. When the pandemic hit, it really made us relook at something that we had called out but had yet to really move into. when we looked at our engagement strategies, it was broken down into three, what's going to sound like pretty simple ideas of here, there, and everywhere. We were knocking here out. To give you an idea as to the size of shed, if you've not been, about between 5 and 6 million gallons of water, 32,000 animals, 1.8 to 2.1 million visitors every single year. Very, very big. Like people were coming from all over the place. And then, you know, we kept talking about really reaching out to there, and we did a couple of things like a mobile aquarium to try to bring some things into some of the different neighborhoods in Chicago to engage in that way. And this ever elusive everywhere was just sitting out there. There was one thing that really rocketed that out, and that is, if any of you saw the viral videos of Wellington the penguin, when Wellington went on some field trips throughout the museum, that just, I think in 3 days, something like 4.9 billion with a B views. And all of a sudden our social media just went, but we still didn't have any real concrete programs to begin with. So the first foray was our learning department put together a camp series, and that was very successful, sold out, did very, very well. It wasn't an enormous revenue generator. It was priced in a way we just didn't know how to price it really, and really just wanted to get out there and have something. And that was the first foray into it. This also was during the time that I'm sure we all wistfully remember when we thought, oh, this can't last more than a couple weeks or a month, or, oh, come on, more than 2 months? Oh, yeah, it's here, huh? And so it was then in July, after we had really reopened, that we put together an interdepartmental crew, myself along with partners in animal care, in IT, in learning, in all of these different areas, to look at our extraordinary experiences, where we had a pretty large suite of, you could be a trainer for a day, you could visit belugas, you could visit penguins, sea otters, behind the scene tours, shark tours, all these different things that we did on site. And the first step was to see what we could take those extraordinary on site and put that into the virtual world. And the eye that we went with was, it's not going to be, because I believe I saw in some of the notes we had taken prior to this, is that, and from a number of conversations I've had with my colleagues, that look at me sometimes like, okay, why would I pay for this? It's like a webcam. I can go to a website and I can just look at the fish. You have a webcam on shedaquarium.org. I can look at some fish. So why would I pay for something else? We really tried to make sure that it was something that you could not see if you came to Shed Aquarium. If you come to Shed Aquarium, you can't go into the penguin habitat. If you do a virtual penguin encounter, you're in the penguin habitat with a trainer, talking to that trainer through the host, getting your questions answered right away, and you're in amongst 30 some odd penguins waddling around, doing what penguins do, which is about pooping every 5 minutes. So it's this really interactive thing that we consider still to be extraordinary. The sea lion encounter, likewise, going behind the scenes. I did take, I grabbed one picture, which I'll try to show you in a moment. I was going to send it, but then I didn't find it, and I just found it again. Gosh darn it, and it just went away on my phone. I'll try to show you later. It was this adorable picture of a sea otter. My goodness, I am really getting embarrassed now because I'm looking now. Well, here's one of a sea lion. Anyway, behind the scenes, I'll show you right there. That's one of our sea lions here. And really the wonderful up close views that you get when you come to Shed. Here we are. This is from our sea otter encounter there. Our trainers working with the otters right then and there, things that you would not see if you came here on site. And that's been our first foray. We're seeing how that goes. We've had mixed results. Certainly not when we first modeled our fill rates, it was based on the only thing we knew, and that was what people came out fill rate wise for our on-site encounters. It's not going to be, it's just not going to be the same when it's virtual. You're going to see peaks and valleys. You're going to see when it first opens and you have this big media blitz, the first couple of weeks, it's going, oh my gosh, this is Christmas is saved, you know, and then after a few weeks, it comes back down to earth. And then if you switch to something else, the last week, all of a sudden there's this rush to get this before it's gone. And that's a lot of what we've seen. And so we're learning from that, and we're putting together our plans for 2021. We are continuing with the 3 sea lion, sea otter, and penguin encounters right now through the end of January. That's what we have in the docket right now. And we may, and we're just going to see how that goes. We're trying a few different strategies to reach out to people who've done on-site encounters to try to bolster this, and just continue to audit and adapt as time goes by. Is that a good start?
Great, thank you. Thank you, that's great. Thanks, Colby. Allie, did you want to share what you all are doing up in Sacramento?
Sure. I feel like Colby had an advantage getting to go first there because you might hear some repetition in what I'm going to say. But as Vicki mentioned, I did start this job the day our museum closed to the public. We had one socially distant meeting in one of our exhibit galleries with our chairs far apart, and then we were sent home, essentially. And we were naive, much like it sounds like the Shed Aquarium was. We thought, oh yeah, 6 weeks maximum. We will definitely be back by Memorial Day. We should probably start planning some event for that weekend. And we didn't see that it would be anything near what it was today. So we went through kind of stages of the pandemic, sort of like stages of grief, where we had different focuses, different objectives, and different audiences in mind for everything we wanted to create virtually. So we had even less than the Shed when we started. We had a social media presence on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and we had a website. That was what we had in terms of online or virtual offerings. Even on our social media, there were very few videos. It was mostly text and picture-based posts. So in our first stage, our really optimistic stage, we had 2 primary goals. We wanted to stay in people's awareness, and we wanted to stay relevant to what they needed at the time. And that time of year, March, April, May, is usually our biggest time of year for school programs. And so we really focused on that audience, on the school kids that were sent home, and on the parents that had to take up the bulk of their learning at that point. So we created Homemade History, which was essentially just a very fast and dirty reimagining of our normal school programs, the 5 most popular ones, into a virtual format. They were done with each of us individually at our own homes. They had no universal branding, no consistency in terms of which way things were filmed. We all were using our personal cameras and other devices. Some had great quality, some not so great quality, but we wanted to give parents and children at home resources, videos of how to make different historic things, to learn about the gold rush, to learn about the Nisenan here, to learn about the agriculture in California. And they were popular for a very brief period of time, but they were a one and done thing. Once you saw the videos and did all the associated activities, there was no reason to go back to this. We also wanted to be relevant to people who didn't have children. So we leaned on a resource we had already had, but had barely used. We had produced these videos for an app called Anytime Tours. These were short videos with our historic guides in character and attire, talking about the history of different buildings in the Old Sacramento Historic District and about different people who were buried at the historic city cemetery. And again, they were very popular for that brief period of time. They were entertaining people, they were giving them an escape, but you watch it once and it's done and there's no real reason to come back to it. And then we didn't open in May. So we went into our second stage where we were still optimistic. We were looking towards reopening. We thought we would get to reopen in July. That did not happen, but that's what we believed at the time. But even still, we thought when we reopen, we'll be at reduced capacity. It'll still be a scary world. There will still be a lot of people who aren't willing to come out and do in-person events. So we need virtual programming. We need things for the long term that people can engage with. And we looked at what we already did normally in person and how we could create a virtual component for it. So we don't have adorable sea otters or sea lions or penguins that can walk around. What we do have, though, is we have our guides. So our tour guides go out as someone who actually lived here in Sacramento during the gold rush. They take on a character, they dress in period attire, and they try to transport you back in time to that world. So that was our equivalent of cute, adorable live animals. The exhibits weren't capturing people virtually, but our storytelling was. That was what made people really want to listen to our programs. So we normally do underground tours. Those are one of our more popular things. We, at Sacramento, had terrible flooding. Their solution was to lift up the entire city, and this tour gets to take you down underneath the buildings, the original city level. Just putting the word underground, we have found it's easy to get an audience. So we thought we'll start with that virtually and see what happens. We specifically did the after hours tour, which is geared for adults, 21 and over. It looks at the seedier side of the gold rush. And we changed it a little bit. Normally we just have one tour guide on it. We brought in a second, allowed them to play off each other. But this meant that we needed to up our technology. So we couldn't use our ad hoc phones anymore. We created a couple nice videos, but we needed something better. So we went to Verizon because we also have terrible Wi-Fi here. So we wanted to work off of data. And they had a special educator deal. Well, we got 2 iPhones and 2 iPads. And then our tour manager became a technology guru all of a sudden when you really would have called him a Luddite before. And we got a gimbal, and we got wireless microphones, and we got a shotgun mic, and all sorts of gizmos and tripods, and we tested extensively. We had about a month where no one was at the museum except for the staff, and we were here really just doing test webinar after test webinar. What if we go in this weird dark corner of this room? Are we going to lose signal? Or what if I walk this far away from the mic? What if I'm behind you? Do you still pick up the mic? And we just tested extensively. And then we opened those up to the public, and they did really, really well. We ran them July and most of August. Unfortunately, at that point, we had wildfires, and the smoke was just so bad outside that it wasn't safe for our guides to continue. But we were also noticing a drop-off at that point. The people that were really interested came in at the beginning, and we didn't have an end date in mind, so I don't think we ever got that group at the end saying, oh, I got to do this before it's gone, because we never really advertised that it would be ending at a certain point. We also had very optimistic volunteers. So the week that we closed, we were supposed to do 2 performances of a Gold Rush era melodrama called Who Killed Wild West that one of our tour guides wrote himself. And they were committed and constantly every week met on Zoom to continue rehearsing until one day they could do this performance. And eventually we conceded, okay, wasn't Memorial Day, probably not going to be Labor Day, we should try this virtually. And that was fantastic. That was a whole new thing for us to have that many people talking to each other on the screen. It looked sort of like the Brady Bunch with all of the boxes talking to each other, and we found lots of fun ways for it to look like you were throwing something to one box and someone would catch it in another box. And we found that that was really popular because it was interactive. All of the audience got to try to figure out who done it. So during our different intermissions, they're asking questions to each of our cast of characters, trying to figure out who is the suspect that probably killed Wild West. That we did learn an important lesson, though. We had people from all over the country watch, not realizing that 7 o'clock Pacific time is 10 o'clock Eastern time. So we learned a very important lesson about making it exceptionally clear what time zone we are working in, as our audience had expanded far before we had, far larger than we'd ever considered. We did also make our summer camps virtual. Unfortunately, they were not as popular as the sheds. Normally we sell out for in-person. We did not for virtual, but the kids that did it enjoyed it a lot. We had a take-home kit that we prepared ahead of time, which would have a packet with all of the activities, as well as all the supplies they would need so they could do the crafts with us at home. It was a lot of work, but it was really great, and we got feedback from the parents that, oh, hey, this is amazing. I can just drop off my child here in front of the screen for an hour and I can go to work. I can get some chores done. I trust you with my kids. And so that inspired us to continue doing these kind of things in the future. So after we didn't open in July, we entered our third phase, the little bit defeated, okay, this is our long haul plan now, but we had to expand what we were doing. We couldn't do the same things over and over again. A lot of them were still one and done, and the people that had wanted to see them had seen them. And we also really wanted to highlight our newest exhibit, California in Print, which was supposed to open the week we closed, but the public never got to see it. And we had pre-planned almost a year's worth of in-person events to go along with it, which weren't going to happen anymore. But inspired by how successful camp was, we came up with virtual workshops and other things with take-home kits. We started by doing a exhibit preview. And we had noticed, in addition to our audience dropping off, the engagement had dropped off. People were not asking questions as much when we were doing these virtual programs. And so we started playing with polls. Polls were great because you're not put on the spot. You don't have to think up a question. We're not asking you to turn on your camera. Just engage with us. And we didn't make it like a test. There's no wrong answer. Just what do you think? Or what might have you done? Or we have this wall with illustrations of what animals in California were believed to have looked like. These were illustrations done by artists that never saw the animals. They just heard a description, so they all look very strange. So one of our polls was just, which of these animals could you not find in California? There was an elephant. It was pretty obvious, but any choice made sense because none of those animals looked right. And we found those were great. People really engaged with those, and so we continued using those. We also looked at more partnerships. Creating virtual programming is exhausting. The groundwork leading up to 1 hour presentation is excessive, and we were doing a lot of independent research for things we knew other museums in our community already knew a lot about. So we've been working to partner with more and more museums as well as outside organizations. We partnered with the Sacramento Valley Medical Society, with Soul Collective, with Design Sacramento, different artists and authors to help produce these programs. Yeah, and then ghost tours was kind of the last big thing we did. This is a thing we normally do every year. It's normally in person, Fridays and Saturdays in the month of October as a walking tour, which will take you through different vignettes, and each vignette looks at real Sacramentans and the way they died here in Sacramento in a family-friendly, spooky kind of way. So this was the first time we pulled in a lot of volunteers, and we were very nervous about that. We tried to make it very clear that it was optional for all of our volunteers, and we detailed the extensive safety guidelines we were going to follow. Luckily, we did get a lot of interest. I think our volunteers wanted to play and were bored just as much as many of the people staying at home were. And here we learned a really important lesson about advertising and marketing. So we did it for 3 nights this time as a virtual event. We had the polls. So you might see a story and then you would say, was this an accident? Was it murder? Was it suicide? You got to vote in the poll. And the first Friday we did this, we sold 42 screens. The second Friday we did this, KCRA, our local news group, highlighted us on their morning show, and we sold out completely 200 screens. So it really made a huge difference to have that marketing in our community, which we hadn't really had the funds to try to find. So it's fantastic that they came to us and were able to advertise it. And that's what we really need to find moving forward. Because we have seen a dip since then. We're competing with the election, we're competing with the holidays. It's hard right now to deal with Zoom fatigue and everything like that. Let's see, we've also started doing virtual programs for school groups. They're essentially the same as our in-person programs would have been, with our educators having different demonstrations and artifacts to show them and take them through the museum. It's been a little bit different for us because these are on a meeting format. Most of our other programs have been a webinar format. And at first it was a little overwhelming to have 30 children on screen at the same time raising their hands and asking questions. But I love that it's that way. We are seeing the same level of engagement and asking questions as we would for in-person school tours. And we've also started doing Facebook Live videos. These are a new thing we're doing. They're called Museum Mondays. They're just sort of deep dives into a topic. You might get a little bit of information at the museum, but this is a way for you to learn more. So we're hoping those will still have interest even once we're open to the public. And those are completely free, which kind of brings me into what our current stage is. We found out on Tuesday, 2 days ago, that we are moving backwards in our tier system. So we have to close our museum again. I'm hoping that'll up the engagement for virtual programs, but again, we're competing with a lot, so I'm not sure. But we've started to both expand, but also fine tune what our programming should be. At the beginning, we kept using the metaphor of throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. And now we've done enough experimentation to know a little bit about what our audience wants, what should be paid for, what should be free. So we've settled on a model where we charge for things that are live, that are 45 minutes or longer, and are interactive. So there needs to be some way for our audience to engage with the program. And that's sort of like what Colby was talking about. It can't be something you can just see at the museum. There has to be something special you can only get through the virtual format. We don't charge for shorter programs, pre-recorded videos, lectures where you're mostly listening with just the opportunity to ask questions. And we're continuing to try to learn more what our audience wants. We didn't do too much evaluation at the beginning, so we're diving into that and trying to come up with more accessibility, things like closed captioning, multiple languages, and addressing the digital divide that is more prominent in our community than I think we were aware of before all of this. So that's a probably more than you wanted to know journey of our past 8 months. I'll let someone else talk now.
That's great. Thank you, Allie. Much appreciated. And I saw there were a couple questions on chat. So Delta, if you wouldn't mind taking some of those and we can start some discussion, and please feel free to unmute yourself and just ask questions as well. We want to make sure we're hearing everybody's voices.
Yeah, there's a couple of things. Victoria was asking if there has been a great deal of tech issues with getting your ticket holders on your live streaming platforms.
So hi everyone, this is Victoria. If I could just clarify real quick, thank you so much. At Bowers Museum, we've been doing a lot of virtual programs, but we have done very few things live that through Zoom because of, in the early days, we heard lots of our colleagues saying it was kind of a nightmare with tech issues to make sure everyone got the link and like it didn't go to spam and all this. So I was really curious to hear your experiences with live.
Yes, so our solution to that has not been one I would recommend. We have had our audiences who buy a ticket and are getting the link, a lot of them are not registering themselves with that link. So our staff has been registering them personally, which is a huge time suck, but it has been the most effective for us. We still do get calls though that people 5 minutes before the program, of course, can't find it or claim that something happened. For the most part, they're very understanding with us. And if anyone does miss the program, we've always been really generous at just offering the recording and a refund if they want it. But most people are happy with the recording and very few have taken us up on the refund.
So to give some perspective as to what we've seen, there have been a couple of flare-ups, more specifically early on. There's some things you have to be aware of as to how you go about sending things out and how you're advertising and how you're doing your e-blasts so that Gmail, Yahoo, Hotmail don't flag you as a spammer. And so if that's the case, then sometimes you'll get shunted off into a folder that someone may not look at. That said, with the way we use our ticketing system is called Tessitura. And it is, it started off at the Met in New York as a way for the opera to do their ticketing, and it eventually has gone into quite a lot of places in the museum world. And it's connected to this thing called Wordfly, which will, once someone makes a purchase, it goes into the system and it automates a confirmation email that gets sent to the participant. The confirmation email has basic information for them, as well as a note just saying you will be sent a follow-up email the day of your encounter by 9 a.m. And if someone doesn't get that by 9 a.m., they reach out to our call center and we're able to help them. Very few, maybe a dozen over since July, late July, when we started doing these, where we've really had problems that had to escalate to like a refund possibility. But similar to Ali, because it's an ongoing thing, we're very, very generous with rebooking. And because it's going to someone's home and they don't have to travel, people are a lot more amenable to rebooking, and there are a lot fewer demands. I'm gonna get a refund, dang it. I want to talk to your boss kind of things. It's just more, yeah, we'll get you in here. I'm so sorry. Let personally make sure this gets to you, send it right away, and take care of it that way. But yeah, so it's been pretty smooth, knock on wood. I mean, I hate that I had to say this in front of a room full of people, because now we're probably going to have issues, but it's gone pretty well so far. I wanted to put one thing really quickly in the chat as well for folks to look at. What I work with primarily, oh, Jennifer, fantastic that you asked that, because what I work with primarily is our paid program stuff, the ancillary operations. The focus of my role is mission-based, experience-enhancing, revenue-generating incremental income. So things like like I said, the 4D experience, if you want to crunch a penny, photos, experiences, a lot of that type of thing. And so the work that I've done in creating programs has been in the fee-based incremental revenue realm. We have a lot of free content as well. We'll do some Facebook Lives. I'll say this: if you're going to do a Facebook Live, be very, and paid stuff, be very careful that you don't double dip and do a big Facebook Live event for the same thing that you're going to charge later on, because then you're going to cannibalize and people are going to start wondering why you're going to pay for what. But I just put a link in there to our Stay at Home with Shed series, a bunch of awesome videos and fantastic activities for people to do at home. So if you'd like to see some of our free content, that's a great launching point to find more. The other thing I was going to say really quickly, Ali, maybe you didn't have adorable otters or adorable penguins walking around, but I guarantee that your humans walking around had a lot less pooping. So you had that going for you.
Very true.
Vicki, there was a little bit of conversation about when Ali talked about partnerships, and I think that was sort of a general asking of everybody if they, if there's some partnerships, or were there, I think, some questions. Jennifer, you had a question about that. Did you want to see us share different partnership ideas, or how were you thinking of that?
I was thinking of that mostly in, there's this myth that, well, it's virtual, so our audience is just unlimited. It can be national, international, right? Everything that we're doing is so great that the world wants to see this. So in just dealing with some of our teams internally, helping them to feel realistic about, well, a partnership with a museum in a different time zone sounds cool, but like maybe, like Ali said, a 10 p.m. murder mystery, they're gonna, push back or something. We're mostly doing concerts, panel discussions, that kind of thing. And sure, we're doing a lot more YouTube things that are pre-recorded and we're like releasing them. So our model is a little different. And that's why I'm very interested in kind of like, are these partnership things realistic? Can you program in partnership? I mean, it's hard enough to work by committee, so I can only imagine how challenging it would be to kind of do this over Zoom or whatever. But and then in terms of promotion too, like if it's kind of, if you're anticipating, getting this, like just what's the international or national footprint that you've had for your virtual programs is kind of, I guess, the big question.
Sure, I can just jump on that. A couple of things. I'll say to the previous question as well, where we had the most issues early on was time zones. People thinking it was going to be Eastern when it was Central. I might have even missed a meeting with Lacey because I forgot to do the math on Central to Pacific. So that does creep in. We've talked to, there's a museum in, an aquarium in Australia whose penguin, they have a penguin that loves looking at screens. And so we're going to have that penguin meet Wellington. But the time when they're able to do it is when the lights are off and our penguins are asleep here. So yes, it is difficult. We have, I was helping to host these encounters when we first started. And I had a number of times, we were really big in Japan. We had a number of people logging in from Tokyo who would it would be like 2 in the morning when they'd be logged in on these encounters. So it is possible, but you're spot on in that you think, because the programs that you all will make are going to be phenomenal. They are. They're going to be awesome. And yes, more people should do them than will do them. You are not going to completely replace the on-site experience. For instance, we were seeing about a 98.5% fill rate for our on-site sea otter encounter. 98.5%. That was 8 of them a day, 8 spots a day, every single day, 98.5%. It's gone down to 34%. Now, we now have 20 spots per encounter. So there's more spaces in each one, but we're only doing it 4 days a week. So you're just not going, it's not going to be that same thing. The inner theater nerd in me, the reason why theater hasn't completely gone away is because almost every time you go see a play and you get dragged to go see a play, by the end of it, you're like, why don't I do that more often? You know, it's because nothing replaces that experience of being right there. We can approximate it and we can make it interactive, and it can justify being paid for. And it does amplify your reach. And we're going to continue to find ways to do this. But speaking to partnerships, when we've talked to a number of our event planners and people in the event world, which has totally evaporated right now, almost to a person, they're coming back. I think they did the 97% of the people that were polled about the future of events is we're not going back to only on-site stuff. It's going to be a blend of on-site and virtual components. So it's going to, please let us get on the other side of this, it's going to be a turn into a way to amplify what you're already doing to audiences you can't get to, or audiences you're getting to, and just making it even better. You come on site, you see the penguins, I want to be inside that habitat. Okay, you can extend your visit by doing a virtual encounter and through your screen be inside there.
We were not as ambitious in our partnerships, so we did not leave the state of California and who we reached out to. Partially that was just we reached out to who we knew. We usually had a topic in mind when we were looking for these partnerships. And we also are still somehow optimistic and hope that we can build these partnerships so in the future we can continue to work on in-person events one day. But I found that in the past, I've tried really hard to partner and people say, yeah, I'm interested. And then the email changes, drops off. Oh, this month doesn't work for us. Oh, that doesn't work for us. And it's very hard. And I found that people have been more willing with the time that the pandemic has given everyone, especially local artists. I found that they are really hurting right now. So they've been very eager. We have a comic book artist who's going to do a workshop with us tied into our California in Print exhibit, a bookbinding artist who, again, tied into the California in Print exhibit. So there are definitely people in the community that normally might be too busy or just not interested in giving this a try that I found have been more eager to do something completely different.
Those were great answers. Thank you, both of you.
There was one other thing, drop-off rates, and I think Colby touched on that a little bit. I think what we're talking about is a drop-off rate where you have 50 people sign up, but only 20 people show up. So do you guys have some drop-off rate information?
I think in general, it's been about 15% for us, regardless of whether it's a paid or a free program. However, the month of November has been abysmal for us. We've had programs where 33 people are signing up and 6 are logging in. I'm really blaming it on the election and saying people are just distracted and want to break from virtual right now, but it's been a very bad drop-off rate for the past few weeks.
Yeah, Zoom fatigue certainly does come and go as the days are getting shorter and just colder here in the state of Illinois. And a little different than y'all Californians enjoying your forever nice weather times. But we're seeing a bit better there. I can speak more to October, Monday, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays. We were free to Illinois residents for coming on site. And generally speaking, on our free days, we'll see about 40% of people who obtain free tickets online not show up. We don't have any pre-reservations for our free stuff, so I don't have good metrics to say you reserved and just weren't able to, because we don't cap that sort of thing.
Okay, Vicki, did you have some questions you wanted to share or ask?
I think one of the things that is really interesting is that position of virtual programs while we're now getting back open in some cases to the general public, or what virtual programs might look like in 2021. Are you still going to be doing them as much and kind of the same? Are you still projecting the same rates? Like, can you speak to that a little bit? Do we slowly move away from virtual because now we're focusing on on-site, or do we keep the virtual up? So any thoughts on that?
Well, the genie's out of the bottle, and the world is never going to, well, I don't know, how long did it take for them to get over the Spanish flu before things got to where you just didn't think about that? I think that people are going to be thinking about this for the foreseeable future. We are going to continue on in some form or fashion. We have to keep the infrastructure there so we can spin up or pare back virtual based on what's happening in on-site and where it complements itself with the virtual. Just to give a slight preview as to the direction that I'm hoping we get the green light to go in 2021, and that is to take what I was sharing earlier of great opening, softer middle, strong close when we were piloting penguins, then we piloted sea otters, and we piloted sea lions. We saw that same model. And then when we did all three in an ongoing thing, all of a sudden it just went, instead of having these peaks, it just went to a lower plateau. So in 2021, if I have my way, and I'm not going to tell you which animals because I can't, but there are a host of different animals that I would love to have 9 of them, right? 9 different animal encounters where for Q1, it's these 3. Then Q2, it's these 3. Q3, it's these 3. Q4, we look at how they all did during the year, and the top 3 performers get brought back for Q4, so that you have that sense of urgency of this is new, I want to do it, and oh my gosh, it's only going to last this long. It's going to get those people that are on the fence to jump into that, and that's one of the areas that because I was told to forecast my budgets, my revenue projections for 2021 with X amount of programs every week throughout the whole year, which generated this number, which makes me want to faint sometimes, that I'm kind of held to the fire my feet to the fire to come up with. It's going to take a lot of adapting over 2021 to do that. And, but yeah, I don't see it going away anytime soon.
Yeah, we're very much in the same boat. We are projecting almost exclusively virtual programming for at least the first quarter of 2021. For the rest of the school year, we're not going to do any in-person school programs, only virtual. But past that, we still think we're going to need to do at least once a month, maybe once a week. It really depends how things shake out. But for accessibility, there always needs to be an option, especially because we rely so heavily on our tour program, and that's not great for people with mobile issues. So we think long-term, we should always have some kind of virtual option.
Great, thank you. Looks like there's another question.
Yeah, we have another question that we've heard that museums are becoming less concerned about online programs being museum quality. They are more accepting of the flaws and glitches. Have you been forgiving with your approaches?
I'm sorry to jump in on this one really quickly, but I love that question because that has become such a thing. Okay, yes and no. There is a certain amount of leeway that the world now has because of Zooming with their cousins, uncles, grandpas who just don't know they're muted or not muted and have different levels of bandwidth. And it's like we're living in a drive-through from Wendy's in the 1980s, you know, where all of that just has become a thing that we all realize. Now, that said, if people are paying for something, they expect a certain quality. So to that end, we went from our first generation of, we utilized 2 Galaxy tablets and 2 headsets. One headset with a microphone, and there's a animal trainer that's talking that has the microphone. There's an animal trainer that's holding the camera, that's doing all the camera angles, listening in so that the host who's working the Zoom and the intermediary does the hosting, right? And we learned that there were some incremental changes that we were able to make. Early on, we had a lot of not so great feedback about the quality. Now, there's only so much you're really going to be able to do because of people's bandwidth, and a lot of the stuff is going to be reliant on how much bandwidth they have. But we found that with some incremental changes, a slight upgrade into a slightly better tablet for the camera, and paying less than $100 to get a not super expensive green screen to go behind the host that's sitting like I am at a computer, all of a sudden makes the virtual background that has shed and a penguin on it look so much better. And so there are incremental things you can do. It's not going to be production studio quality, but there are things that can be done that will tweak it just enough to make it to where it feels intentional.
I will agree with pretty much all of that. We have found that with ourselves, those little mistakes being a little more personal, a little more of a human being. We're not a robot reciting a script to you. We make a mistake, we address it, we talk to you about it. We've even had some very smart people in our comments say, I think you said the wrong date for that, and we can acknowledge it on the spot. But for us, what our audience has not been forgiving with is the sound quality. So that's why we did invest in our wireless lapel mics, and we got the shotgun mic for any situation where we have multiple speakers or we want something other than the speaker to be heard. A little bit of glitches, they're understanding, they've Zoomed, but the sound, they need to be able to hear it for it to really be worth paying for in their minds.
I wanted to put in one last question, Vicki. I think we have time for one more, and that, because I think this is very interesting. Maybe quick answers, but do you make a pitch for donations during your free programs? And if so, what does that look like?
It really depends on the program. For us, we have done it, and if so, we do it at the end as kind of a thank you so much for joining us for this presentation. If you're interested in helping us do more of this work in the future, you can make a donation. Zoom also allows you, after the webinar is complete, to have a window pop up. So we've used that for surveys in the past, but you can also use that to just direct them directly to your donation page after the program is done. So it's not so in their face, they get the choice, they can just click out of the window, we'll never know.
We interweave a very small conservation message, well, a large conservation message with each of our things, but a small portion of the conservation message is talking about our animal response team, which will partner with Monterey Bay, which will partner with all kinds of different aquarium, zoos, and conservation initiatives. And so we'll mention it, and we'll say there are, what are ways that you can help. One of the ways you can help is to become a member, or if you wish to do things like that. So it's a very light touch, again, because it's a paid program, but you'd be surprised how many people did one of our things and ended up doing all 3 of them, and then ended up becoming a member, and then ended up becoming a donor through this trail that was created.
That's great.
Well,
Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ali. Were you going to add one more thing?
No, I was just going to say we noticed that same thing as well, that someone would buy one ticket for an event and they'd end up purchasing multiple, and then they'd get the membership. So it has had some good retention of new members.
Can I throw one thing in there as well to go back to the partnership thing? One of the things that we're finding is more and more, especially around the holidays, is something to keep in mind that corporations are wanting to turn a penguin encounter or a sea otter encounter into a holiday party. So partnering with big companies who they are, especially in the tech industry, I'll just put that out there, who love this type of thing, can become a great audience as well that can help further your stewardship.
Such a great idea. That's great.
That's great.
Well, it seems like we're at the end of time. So thank you, Ali and Colby, for taking the time to be here with us today. Delta, thank you for being a great partner on this journey. I appreciate it. And I don't know if we'll just throw it back to you, Lacey. Or to Moki.
Yeah, actually, I'll go ahead and jump in. Vicki and Delta, thank you so much for inviting Colby and Ali today. It was a great discussion. We covered a lot of ground and a lot of great takeaways. Really, really informative, really, really helpful. So thank you everyone for participating today. You will be receiving a link to a program evaluation, and we'd love to get your feedback. So please take a look at that when it arrives in your inbox. Next week's ReMuseum program by CAM will feature the topic fundraising in challenging times, which is kind of interesting. You know, both Colby and Ali, you were talking about how virtual programming, ticket sales, memberships, you know, may have led in some ways to, you know, a more engaged new donor. So maybe that's one of the things that'll be covered. But anyway, join us next Thursday. And then I also want to give a plug for the CAM Spring Virtual Conference. We are in a period of a call for proposals right now. You can find links and information. I think Lacey is going to put that in the chat box, but you can also find it on the website. We would love to hear from more people talking about, you know, relevant topics of today that can help the field. So with that, thank you everyone, and we'll see you next week.